Part 1.
When Mark and Jane arrived in Edinburgh, they discovered that Mark had left his camera on the train. At the Lost and Found office, he has to fill in a lost property form.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good evening, sir. Can I help you?
Yeah, I think I left my camera on the train from London early today.
Did you, sir? Oh, well. In that case, we'd better fill in a lost property form. Can you tell me your name?
Yeah, it's Mark Adams.
Okay. Your address?
You mean in Britain or in the States?
How long are you staying?
Oh, I've still got a few months in Britain.
Okay, then. Can you give me your address here?
Right. It's 21 Thames Drive, Leigh-on-Sea. That's Leigh on Sea, Essex.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Do you want the phone number?
Yes, I'd better have that.
Okay, 0702 35211.
Thanks. And you say it was a camera. What make and model?
It's a Ricoh.
Ricoh. How do you spell that?
Ricoh.
Okay, got that. Now, you say it was the London train. What time did it arrive in Edinburgh?
At 4:55 this afternoon. Exactly on time.
Well then, if we find it, sir, shall we phone you?
No, I think I'll drop in the day after tomorrow to check up.
Right you are, sir. We'll do our best.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello, and thanks everyone for coming here today. I know it's always a bit stressful going for a job interview, but it's best to be prepared. For any of you who may not know me, my name is Fiona Ogilvie, and my job is to offer guidance and support for students with special needs. Now, you wouldn't be here today if you weren't interested in finding a job in the holidays. So let's get down to it and see what things you need to be looking out for. Most of you, I hope, will be applying for jobs with the companies that have been recommended by the university. The reason for this is that we here at the university already know these companies and have established good working relationships with them. I've also been to visit all of them and checked out the facilities they have to offer. You really need to make informed choices when you're looking for a job and make sure you know before you even get to the interview stage that your needs will be met. But I know that some of you are applying for jobs independently and have looked at companies outside the university recommended list. So for you, it's best to plan ahead and be aware of what it is you may need while you're working. Things that you need to check when you go for an interview are there enough toilet facilities and are these easily accessible? Also, you want to check that all the public areas inside the building are barrier-free, so you can get direct access to these public spaces whenever you need to. And ask about ramps into the building, so you know how many there are and where they are located. These kinds of things are so much more difficult to sort out when you've started work, as they take time. But ramps are an absolute must, so please make sure you know where they are. Another thing you must make sure of is that the lifts have the correct lowered control panels. Ask if all the lifts have this facility or if it's only certain ones. Now, something I think that is often overlooked is working hours. What you want to make sure of is that you get flexi time. This basically means that your working hours are flexible and you can clock on and clock off in times that suit you. Within reason, of course. Most companies do recognise that it takes much longer for someone in a wheelchair to get on and off buses and trains. Public transport can take that much longer, so you need to be organised and prepared. And for those of you lucky enough to own a car, check how many disability parking spaces are available. Remember that it's your right to have a disabled parking space. These also need to be near enough to a wheelchair accessible entrance or ramp. OK, are there any questions before we move on?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
Right, let's move on then. Now I want to talk you through the series of visits to companies which we've got planned for next week. On Monday morning, we will be visiting the Lowland Hotel. They have various summer jobs available, working as a receptionist or conference organiser in their busy conference centre, organising and setting up conferences. You need to be prepared for working in an office environment and spending quite a bit of time talking on the telephone. The bus leaves for the hotel at 9 a.m, so make sure you leave yourself plenty of time to get there. When you arrive at the hotel, please gather in the reception area and wait for someone to take you to your first session, which will be a talk. The talk at the hotel will begin at 10 a.m, and then there will be a short tour of the hotel. There will be a light lunch provided, which is usually salads and sandwiches. The next place we'll be visiting will be on Tuesday afternoon. We'll be going to visit a little local company that makes handmade paper and cards. For those of you studying art, this may be just what you're looking for. We'll be taken on a tour of the company which lasts 3 hours. The tour will start at 3:30 p.m, and after that you'll have a chance to meet some of the staff. Tea and coffee will also be provided. We have no trips planned for Wednesday, but on Thursday morning we'll be going to Tobago Travel Agency. This is a very popular choice amongst our students because you can get student discounts on holidays. We've booked a coach for this, and it'll leave from outside the refectory at 8 a.m. You'll need to bring a packed lunch for this, so please don't forget. There is a little canteen where you can buy hot and cold food, but this is closed on Thursdays. Friday, we'll be having representatives from all the companies visiting us, so you will have a chance to ask any questions, and of course, put your name down on the list if you're interested in working for them over the summer. This event will take place in the main hall next to the library, and it'll run from 10:30 until 4. I really hope you make the most of this excellent opportunity to not only earn yourself some extra money, but also to gain experience of what it's like to work. And if you'd like to find out more, then please ask some of the students who worked last year. They're all wearing green badges and will be happy to speak to you afterwards.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between two students, David and Claire. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, David. How are you going with your history studies?
Very well. I've actually finished it.
That's great! What era did you write on?
I researched Roman London, something I never thought I'd be interested in.
That sounds interesting.
I wanted to tie it into the work I've been doing on engineering, and I found it fascinating and learned many things along the way.
Such as?
Well, although there were prehistoric settlements throughout the vast area now called London, strangely enough, no evidence has yet been found for any such community at the northern end of London Bridge, where the present city grew up.
The origins of London lie in Roman times, right?
Right. When the Romans invaded Britain in 43 AD, they moved north from the Kentish coast and traversed the Thames in the London region, clashing with the local tribesmen just to the north. It has been suggested that the soldiers crossed the river at Lambeth, but it was further downstream that they built a permanent wooden bridge, just east of the present London Bridge, in more settled times some 7 years later. As a focal point of the Roman road system, it was the bridge which attracted settlers and led to London's inevitable growth.
So, London Bridge has been there for hundreds of years?
Yes, and though the regularity of London's original street grid may indicate that the initial inhabitants were the military, trade and commerce soon followed. The London Thames was deep and still within the tidal zone, an ideal place for the berthing of ships.
What other industry did they have?
Well, as the area was also well drained and low-lying, it was geologically suitable for brick-making. There was soon a flourishing city called Londinium in the area where the monument now stands.
Londinium? That's Latin.
That's what I thought too, but the name itself is Celtic, not Latin, and may originally have referred merely to a previous farmstead on the site.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Wasn't London burned to the ground at some stage?
It happened in AD 60 by the forces of Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe from modern Norfolk, when she led a major revolt against Roman rule. The governor, Suetonius Paulinus, who was busy exterminating the Druids in North Wales, marched his troops south in an attempt to save London, but, seeing the size of Boudica's approaching army, decided he could not mount an adequate defence and evacuated the city instead. Not everyone managed to escape, though, and many were massacred.
What about the beautiful old architecture? Did you research that too?
I sure did. The major symbol of Roman rule was the Temple of the Imperial Cult. Emperor worship was administered by the Provincial Council, whose headquarters appear to have been in London by AD 100. A member of its staff, named Anancletus, buried his wife on Ludgate Hill around this time. Pagan worship flourished within the cosmopolitan city. A temple to the mysterious Eastern god Mithras was found at Bucklersbury House and is displayed nearby.
I quite like St. Paul's.
Traditionally, St. Paul's Cathedral stands on the site of a temple of Diana. Other significant buildings also began to appear in the late 1st century, at a time when the city was expanding rapidly. The Forum, a marketplace and basilica which housed the Law Courts complex at Leadenhall Market, was erected and then quickly replanned as the largest such complex north of the Alps. The Forum was much bigger than today's Trafalgar Square.
Who was in charge of all the town planning at the time?
Procurator Agricola. He encouraged the use of bathhouses and had a grand public suite made, which is now being excavated in Upper Thames Street. They were as much a social venue as a place to bathe. There was a smaller version at Cheapside, and in later centuries, private bathhouses were also built. Another popular attraction was the wooden amphitheatre, erected on the northwestern outskirts of the city. It's possible that gladiatorial shows were put on here, though lesser public sports, like bear baiting, may have been more regular.
I thought that happened mainly in the Colosseum in Rome, but I guess London being settled by the Romans explains their lust for blood.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You are going to hear a talk about security in the UK. Listen to the talk and complete the statements below.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In large cities, for instance London, and crowded places such as airports and stations, there is the risk of theft. We do not want you to suffer the distress of losing important documents and valuables as soon as you step onto British soil. So here are some important do's and don'ts. Don't carry more cash than you need for daily expenses. If you stay at a hotel, Do ask the manager to keep large sums of cash, documents and valuables in the hotel safe and give you a receipt for them. This is a free service. If cash is stolen, it is very unlikely to be recovered. Do keep separately a note of the serial numbers on your traveller's checks, so if they are lost you can inform your bank. Do take particular care of bank and credit cards. Do carry wallets and purses in an inside pocket or a handbag. Don't ever leave a bag unattended and make sure it is securely fastened when you are carrying it. Do carry jewellery and valuables such as cameras, radios and typewriters on you or with you and keep a note of any serial numbers. Do take special care of your passport, travel tickets and other important documents. Documents are at risk particularly at airports and stations where it is obvious that most people will be carrying them. Do make a note and keep it in a safe place of the number of your passport, its date and place of issue. This makes replacement easier if you are unlucky enough to lose it. If you don't want to carry heavy luggage around with you, you can leave it in a luggage office at most large stations and pick it up later. Keep the receipt so that you can reclaim your luggage. Check the opening hours or you may find your luggage locked away when you need it again. If you lose any of your luggage in transit, take this up immediately with the officials of the airline or shipping line. But don't worry too much. 98% is found within 3 days. If you lose anything, go first to the lost property office at the airport or station, as it may have been found and handed in. If you lose your luggage in the street or suspect it has been stolen rather than gone astray, find the nearest policeman who will advise you what to do.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.